a bit of an accumulation of all sorts of things. You know, it was getting to know the vessel, familiarising with the vessel. It was having to set up the vessel, with the systems, getting familiar with the systems, getting stores and equipment on board. You know, you've got a ship which is a bare shell, you know, and that's it. So then you need to get all the equipment on board for you to live and work and be able to maintain the vessel, as well as familiarise crew, get to statutory inspections and safety drills, but ultimately, you know, deliver her, sail her back to the UK, and then get her into passenger service.
So you weren't just there for the kind of final bit of the build process, you were also there for the kind of commissioning, and actually you were on board for the trip back from Turkey back to Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was there for commissioning, for inspections with the yard, with the owners, and of course, yeah, I was there for the journey back as well. So that was quite an interesting experience doing that.
Yeah, it sounded like you had an eventful journey back with weather and some other events that maybe you weren't expecting. How was that journey back from Turkey?
Yeah, well, it was a great team bonding experience, let's put it that way. The crew certainly got to know each other, and we certainly also got to know the vessel. Weather was, well, we were fraught with awful weather for the time of year, you know, January, February, the worst time of year to do this, but unfortunately needs must, and we had to get her back. But of course, as part of the weather, when we were in Gibraltar, the weather was so bad that it was passing through, we had to actually leave Gibraltar. We sought shelter off the north coast of Morocco, and that's when we actually rescued a migrant from the water who'd been floating in there, we estimate, probably about 8 to 10 hours, something like that.
So you spotted a migrant floating around, and the ship did a full rescue procedure on that person, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw him straight away, we initiated our man overboard procedures, and we launched a rescue boat, and ultimately, within a matter of minutes, we had the guy on board and receiving medical attention and treatment on board. And full credit to the team who were on board. They did absolutely, you know, amazingly, and it really brought everyone together, and it helped us to learn the vessel more and also learn lessons from it, not just for this ship but for the other ships as well. So it's such a great training exercise, but also a real life scenario.
And when the ship gets back to Scotland, what's the kind of procedure? How long did it take from it arriving in Scotland to kind of being in service?
We were quite fortunate actually that it was roughly about a month to 6 weeks. During this time it included a brief stint in Dales Dry Dock, that's just on the Clyde there, and that was just a quick a hull survey, look underneath, see how the ship was, carry out any essential maintenance work as part of the guarantee process. But it also meant doing crew familiarisation, getting our core crew on board who hadn't already been on board, maybe from the catering and retail staff. It also included doing safety drills for the MCA, because now we've changed from doing a delivery voyage muster list, which basically gives us all our duties and stations in emergency, to a full-blown passenger muster list for up to 450 passengers and 23 crew. So we have to drill that and prove that we can carry that out as a crew for the MCA, the Maritime Coast Guard Agency. Following that as well, we then had to trial her around the network, take her through all the potential ports that we could visit, see whether she fitted, do berth fits with the bow ramp, the stern ramp, the gangways, and work out where we can and can't go to, and if there's any then modifications that are required after that.
One of the really unique features about this vessel, from my point of view as well, is when we walked onto the vessel, the stern ramp. Now, the stern ramp on the vessel is particularly wide, but many of the berths in the Western Isles of Scotland have got very narrow link spans, the ramps that connect the ship to the shore. So on the end of the very wide stern ramp here, there was a narrow section that finally connects the ship to the shore, but that section can be moved, and if I'm right, that allows the ship to really operate in any of the ports around the network.
Yeah, you're quite right there. We have the stern ramp is in 2 sections. The first section is fixed, it's the full width of the stern of the vessel basically, so you can drive vehicles right up to the back end, because unlike some of our older vessels that sort of concave in, you can't take vehicles all the way to the end, so you lose deck space, and as a result you can't take as many vehicles. Ours allows us to drive vehicles all the way to the end. But then the second section, as you say, is the clever bit. That's the smaller section that actually slides on a rail all the way across. We have preset positions for the ports that we regularly visit, but it also allows us to manually set the position depending where we are. So in theory, as long as the vessel fits in there, we can go to any port on the network and stern load in there.
And in terms of your kind of progression now, I mean, last time we spoke to you, Harvey, you were on the English Channel. We've spoken briefly about that when you were on the bridge there earlier, but how much different is it up here in the Western Isles of Scotland? It's a lifeline service. The islands rely on you. You're not really competing in the same way that maybe your previous employer would be competing on the channel. I look out the bridge windows here and it's almost hard to see another vessel anywhere. How different is it, and how are you enjoying the kind of contrast?
Well, it's pretty much everything that you've said just there. You know, it's a completely different change of pace of life, of everything. You know, we run a lifeline service. The islands depend on us, and as a result, you know, we endeavour to make that service as best as possible for them. You know, whether it be timings, making sure we can take that extra car or two if people need to get that extra foot passenger, waiting 5 minutes because the bus is running slightly late so people can make the ferry connection. This is something, as you quite rightly said, in a more commercial operation, you'd be told, no, sorry, you wait for the next sailing end off. Here we don't do that. You wait, you sort of go that extra mile and you wait for these people. It's a totally different change of life. As you say, there's very few ships about, but you know what, it's a great pace. It's a lot slower pace of life. The scenery is stunning, the wildlife is equally stunning, and the people are great as well. You know, it's a really great place to work and just to be part of, really.
And you're chief officer on the vessel at the moment, but since we last spoke, you've got your captain's ticket, you've passed the exam to become a captain, so in the future that's the next step up to actually be fully a captain on a ship like this?
Yes, absolutely, yes. So I'm chief officer on here and I've got my Masters Unlimited now, which allows me to be a captain of a ship of any size. So that is, of course, the ultimate goal, as it always has been. We run a lifeline service. The islands depend on us, and as a result, you know, we endeavour to make that service as best as possible for them. You know, whether it be timings, making sure we can take that extra car or two if people need to get that extra foot passenger, waiting 5 minutes because the bus is running slightly late so people can make the ferry connection. This is something, as you quite rightly said, in a more commercial operation, you'd be told, no, sorry, you wait for the next sailing end off. Here we don't do that. You wait, you sort of go that extra mile and you wait for these people. It's a totally different change of life. As you say, there's very few ships about, but you know what, it's a great pace. It's a lot slower pace of life. The scenery is stunning, the wildlife is equally stunning, and the people are great as well. You know, it's a really great place to work and just to be part of, really.